right, welcome back into another special Friday edition of Content is for Closers. This is back-to-back weeks with Friday episodes.
We're just kicking it up a notch.
We have really great content. We have some exciting stories to tell, and so we thought
we have me and Adam in person.
We've got that's the biggest thing. We've got
huge game changer.
Each other in person. So this episode was with Scott Luton of Supply Chain Now, and I mean the story of Supply Chain Now, if you don't know it, is really incredible. Scott shared bits and pieces of it throughout our conversation. But what did you think, Carlton, about the whole conversation?
Yeah, good conversation. He's just a humble guy, especially for the following that they have. Very, very kind, very humble. So really what they've done is they've taken this idea of going into a specific industry, a specific niche, and they've gone down super deep and found ways to make it more applicable. So now they're doing that with other industries as well. And I think they've got an incredible business model for finding things that may not be the most appealing businesses to be covering, but they're doing it in such a quality way that people are attracted to it.
Yeah, this is a classic example of an overnight success. Like if you missed the last whatever decade of work that has led to this point, you could look at what Scott is doing, what his team is doing, the variety of shows that they have, and be like, man, it's just so easy. You know, you could just jump in and start a media company, but you'd be missing. They've been through iterations of just going deep into one area, being supply chain, developing an entire brand around that, and then now taking the byproducts of both the content that they produced all over all those years, as well as the lessons learned, and applying it to other areas as well. So they are now diversifying when it comes to content, but I think the build up, the foundation that they are diversifying from is really, really important too when you're telling that story.
Yeah, that's super well said. With that, let's jump in.
On this episode, we're joined by Scott Luton, the founder, CEO, and host of Supply Chain Now. Scott has obviously been very successful as he's built Supply Chain Now, which is an award-winning global digital content platform and robust community. But as Carlton notes in our intro, he is also in the running for the kindest guest that we've ever had on this show. Just a remarkably nice person. During our conversation, Scott goes into detail on how he and the team have built Supply Chain Now as a niche media platform, how that has evolved over the years, and what diversification into new areas looks like for a mature media company. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and I think you will too. Without further ado, let's get into it with Scott Luton from Supply Chain Now. All right, we're back. Another episode of Content is for Closers. We've got Scott Luton. Actually, I probably should have asked you that in the pre. Is it Luton? Luton? How do you say the last name?
You nailed it, man. Luton. Adam,
there we go.
Johnny on the spot. Love it.
Scott, I always have some fun, question or icebreaker to get into things with you, though. I have a selfish question, and that is, you're in supply chain, you know the space. What's happening? Is diesel going to be $10 by the end of the summer? Am I going to have to sell my truck? Like, what are we looking at here from your perspective?
Well, change, and more change, right? I think these last few years, unfortunately, has really shown. We hear the word resilient, thrown around all the time, but really we've uncovered just how fragile global supply chains can be, right? And how difficult it is to digest change while taking care of the customer at the price they want it and at the service levels and where they want it and how quickly they want it. So it's really a fascinating time. I think you throw on top of, you look at some of the historic things that global supply chain is digesting. Start with the pandemic, of course, right? That alone has been a seismic shift. And then you couple that with, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Did you ever stop and think, I've got 3 kids. How about yourself, Adam? Any kids?
Two little boys. Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure how long ago your infant formula usage was. It's been a little while for us. But when we were going through that left and right, I never stopped to think about what went into it, like many consumers. So I never, of course, connected the dots until what we're seeing now, where Ukraine is the top sunflower oil producer, right, in the world, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, unfortunately, that has been the wonderful people of Ukraine and their way of life, including their business, has been disrupted, perhaps like they haven't seen in modern times.
Yeah.
And of course, we hope that comes to an end. But do you know who the number 2 producer of sunflower oil is?
I don't.
Russia.
Wow.
Holy cow. So, and of course, right now Russia is using as many counter leverage points as they can, as the world thankfully has come to condemn
Mm.
what it's doing there in Ukraine. So, um, still, you're kind of setting aside the human component, which is next to impossible. But if you look at things sheerly through supply chain optics, we're seeing more change and more compounding difficulty. Old fashioned change and old fashioned challenges, and a lot of things that we've never seen before, all making it very tough to to serve your customer from a supply chain standpoint. One last thing, Adam, because in terms of what's going on, where we're headed, there was a report by a variety of different folks, and we've seen global supply chain has seen more turnover than in at least since 2016. And according to some of the root causes here, burnout,
Mm.
and that sounds very intuitive, burnout. And while you can make a great living in supply chain, other industries are noticing the GSD type of folks that make up global supply chain getting stuff done, problem solving, innovation, the strong leadership skills, project management skills, change management skills, and they're, of course, recruiting from global supply chain. So, we're going to have to get that, put our hands around that and get in a headlock to make sure that we have the talent we need in the global industry.
Well, Scott, I appreciate you answering that. And the reason I even ask is because obviously you're very well versed in supply chain. You lead a company called Supply Chain Now. You have been in the industry for a long time, but you left the industry itself of supply chain to go and build a media company, which is very difficult in and of itself. So, what was the motivation? What was the impetus behind that?
So, Adam, you and I are going to have to grab a beer and maybe kind of compare notes on building a media company
Sure.
because, as you point out, it is not easy, even in the perhaps the golden age of social media and digital media right now, right? Um, but kidding aside, I've been a big supply chain nerd since my very first manufacturing plant tour some 20 years ago. Prior to that, being in the Air Force and the military in general, logistics, which is the backbone of global supply chain, that's what the military
Mm.
does day in and day out. So really coming to appreciate operations, coming to appreciate global supply chain, coming to really love manufacturing, spending several years working in supporting manufacturing industry. Um, some of the best people I've ever met, some of the best folks in the world that would I'd rub elbows with and collaborate with and solve problems with and lose some of our 9 lives with. And these folks, um, I come to find out that they deserve to have their story told, right?
Mm.
So for me, for my why, starting that digital media company was about helping these folks get their stories out, helping consumers become more aware of what goes on in global supply chain, helping to share, of course, powerful stories, market intel, those problems and solutions. I think that is, I love when folks, and you can probably relate here, Adam, when folks hear one of our interviewees talk about common challenges and how they addressed it, and then we get feedback after the show that different
Mm.
folks are trying those same things. That is like, man, that's exactly why we started doing this. Innovative ideas, leaders, but along those same lines, I don't know about you, Adam. We met, I believe, on Twitter or one of the social
Hmm.
platforms,
Yeah.
and I've come to appreciate, much like our relationship, these digital relationships, and some of them become some of them become in person. Others stay right there in those digital channels, and some of those relationships uh, are amongst my most valuable ones that I
Sure.
really relish. And then, so for the way I look at our media, digital media platform is we also want to help folks connect
Mm.
and find and build and invest in similar digital relationships. I think that's a unique aspect, perhaps, of modern digital media versus some of the traditional approaches of media in the past.
Yeah, so take us back to that because I think you've been doing this for a while, and when now there are lots of voices who are doing this in the industry, in the supply chain space specifically. But I think you were sort of a pioneer doing it independently. So what did that look like? How did that start, and how has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, Adam, great question, and I appreciate your kind words. Thankfully, there's lots of folks, not just in digital media creation, right? Because it is truly, there's such a low bar for doing it, which is one of the beautiful things about it. I think 2.8 million podcasts,
Yeah.
right? And as we all know, podcast is just part of the whole digital media equation. And by extension, there's a lot more folks covering the wide world of end-to-end supply chain, and we love that too. But where I got my start in the good old webinars. I was volunteering with a supply chain organization that had a broad footprint, and its members had a really hard time, you know, planning and executing on those monthly rubber chicken and 1,000 slide dinner meetings, right? That made up the association landscape for so long. So I was like, raised my hand and said, "Hey, let's do a monthly webinar." And I loved doing live webinars. They all, some are better than others. You're right, depending on if the presenter allowed it to be conversational sometimes, but that's okay.
Sure.
Most importantly, it was allowing folks to learn and connect and gain ideas and connect with their fellow practitioners remotely, right? So that was some 10, 12 years ago. And so webinars, that monthly webinar kind of led me to experimenting with a podcast. What is this podcast thing? I think we did 8 podcasts our first year, and I think we published an episode 900 last week.
Wow.
Adam.
Congrats.
So, I really appreciate that. We stand on the shoulders of giants, both in our industry and, here at Supply Chain Now, our team. But that's where we got our start, and it has been an incredible journey ever since.
Yeah, I mean that you said that, I can't remember the exact number, but over 2 million podcasts that exist now. When we first got into this industry about 5 years ago, it was under 1 million. It was in the 700,000 range. So it's been a huge season of acceleration for the whole industry. But with that being the case, the stakes, the points of entry are lowered. And so you see a lot of folks start and a lot of folks get some momentum and excitement. That's great. But to make it to even, I think it's like episode 7, the percentage falls off a cliff. So to make it 900 episodes is definitely something worth commending, and the endurance that you've had to have to do that. And I'm sure it's, one of the things that has helped you is the ability to scale past yourself when you're building a media company like that. It can't just be Scott, out there talking and developing different shows. So just be curious from a creator perspective, what have you found that has helped you scale the company and your shows past just you yourself?
Again, appreciate your kind words. Love this question. And clearly you've been there and done it. It's such a great question. It's so accurate. It is easy to jump in and start a podcast and really be a team of one to do it. That's the beautiful thing of it. But what you're pointing to is that attrition. I think a lot of folks will jump into a podcast, want to build the next big podcast, which we love, and then assume that the monetization aspect of it is pretty easy. I'll get some sponsors, knock it out, a weekly podcast. It's tough to make money. It's tough to build that model. And then number 2, it's also tough, especially if it's not your main gig and you're not making money yet, to get really consistent, right? Even if you've got the best expertise, the best voice, the most passion, you got to carve time out to do it. So, recognizing those early challenges. I think for me, it starts with the why, and that's it. I never wanted it to be about me. It was always, I want to build a big old tent with a big old digital family, and that's at the heart of who I am. A variety of viewpoints. You remember Baskin Robbins, right?
Yes.
A Baskin Robbins approach of creating different types of content. And I think, by thinking of it far beyond yourself, you've got to create that vehicle that works for the others involved, right? So all of that and then some. So for me, it was like, okay, how do we figure it out? This has to be about an industry. This has to be about a global ecosystem. It has to be about many other voices. So recognizing that why, then we had to make sure that at the core, Supply Chain Now, it was working, and hey, the boss, being the market, liked it. So that took a lot of trial and error. We mentioned 900 plus episodes. Experimentation. There was a lot of experimentation. Some of it worked, thankfully. A lot of it didn't. So, but when you publish a podcast every day, Monday through Friday, in those early days, sometimes Saturday and sometimes Sunday,
Wow.
it allowed lots of experimentation, a ton of experimentation. That was critical. So once we got the formula right on Supply Chain Now, the mothership, which by the way, and I'm very humble about this. This is our team and the hosts and the guests, but Supply Chain Now is ranked in the top 1.5% of all podcasts, regardless of genre,
Wow.
and that's something we celebrate regularly, right? Regularly. So once we had the formula right, then it was about finding, kind of what I did every day kind of shifted, right? Because it no longer was about finding the best guests. As much as I love to interview and love to share and amplify their stories and whatnot, for me, it let's share that burden. Let's also spend some time every day looking for compelling, widely respected expert hosts
Mm.
that also really understand how to create digital content that resonates, right? So can I name drop a little bit, Adam?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love that.
Okay, all right, because we wouldn't be here without the Greg Whites, who's my main partner in crime on Supply Chain Now. He built Tequila Sunrise, a different niche, entrepreneur, M&A activity, startup. I call him a startup whisperer. Different voice. Kelly Barner on Doppy for procurement and This Week in Business History. Kevin L. Jackson, Digital Transformers, all about digital transformation, which is a much broader topic. Corinne Bursa on Tech Talk, Digital Supply Chain Podcast, and Mary Kate Saliva here recently as she's joined us to lead Veteran Voices, right, which is really our pro bono programming. We had to find and build relationships with all those brilliant folks that understand what it's like and how much work it takes, to build a separate brand, right, and put in the work to do that. As consistent, if it's once every week or once every 2 weeks, it's a lot to ask. So you have to have the right folks, leading those separate properties. And then I think once we find them and once we build those relationships and we make sure that they're built the right way, where there's incentive for them, there's incentive for us, there's a content creation opportunity, then it's applying the mothership a formula to those properties. We got to create that digital content version or extension, really, of their respective brands. And then, I don't know, as I talk about it out loud, as I'm thinking out loud here, Adam, it might sound easier said than done, but man, helping bring those new shows to life, it is incredibly rewarding. And that all of that has been how we've made sure that this journey we're on is not about my viewpoint, and only my viewpoint, but it's about a global ecosystem of very talented folks that have strong voices that the rest of the world should hear.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's it. If you've tried to create even one show that's a success, you know how difficult that is. And so to see someone who is an organization that's building multiple shows, and these aren't, I mean, I don't think your shows are not news or entertainment weekly or talking about the latest Hollywood. Maybe that's the next show you're building, but these are difficult subjects where you have to have a lot of information, a lot of expertise, and then share that in a compelling and entertaining way. So the way that you all have done this.
You nailed it on the head, and it's changing by the minute, right? It's changing by the minute, and even the old norms, some of the old norms, in a good way, they're changing, and also in a bad way, they're changing. But I'm sure you can appreciate this because you are a pro at what you do, Adam. Really, you do it right. You've got a variety of shows, and I've admired y'all's approach as well. We both know that beyond the hosts and beyond the business model, beyond even the vision, you got to have that top-notch production and marketing team full of experts, because they help make it consistent and professional, and they help us meet that listener expectation or demand, really.
Sure.
Because if we're not meeting that, they're not going to be listeners for long.
It's a great point. Yeah. And you all obviously have a great team behind you. You did touch briefly there on the fact that you give back. One of your shows is sort of dedicated to that. If you go to the Supply Chain Now website, it's clearly a point of emphasis. And I just wanted to ask you, it's not something that you see a lot in media companies. I think it's something that we're learning as a new industry, something that we need to emphasize more with the platforms that we have and all these sorts of things. But just talk about how you use the business in order to give back to these things that are so important to you and your communities.
Adam, I love this question because giving forward, as we call it here, which was coined by Greg White, giving forward meaning, hey, I don't have Jeff Bezos money or resources, right? We're still a startup,
Sure.
right? We're still a startup. But I've always thought it's really important to give from what you have, and that's really what when we say give forward, and that's what we're talking about, right? Don't wait to give until you've made it big, which will that's good too. That's very important, but give all along the way. I hate lip service leadership. You probably do too. Most folks do. So for me, it's like don't just talk about it. You do it. Deeds, not words. So it is important. It's core to who we are as a business, as a culture, as a team, as an individual. A couple of our recent ways, and we don't do it to brag,
Sure.
but I think it is important to do it to challenge others to do
Yeah.
it. Right. I think that's so important for us as a veteran that spent time in the United States Air Force. We've invested in a number of veterans related initiatives. The Veteran Voices series I mentioned earlier, that crested over 50 episodes not too long ago.
Wow.
And that's, as you point out, the world stops at 7, it's, and a lot of them don't even get to there.
Right.
So, the investment that goes into 50 episodes and we use those brilliantly led by Mary Kate Saliba to lift up, veteran issues, veteran stories, especially from a transition standpoint, which we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. And to hopefully help inform, things like hiring managers so they can kind of connect with veteran speak and kind of that veteran point of view. On that show, Adam, last summer, I think it was, I interviewed a husband and wife team, a family of 5. They led a family of 5, and this Marine veteran he and his family of 5 was living in his car during the pandemic.
Oh my goodness.
They're homeless. And that, as we both know, it should never happen. But man, if we don't get the word out on those things, and they were bold in how they shared and very transparent in how they shared their story, that'll stay in the blind spot of so many, right? All of us. So Veteran Voices has been important for us from a give forward standpoint. We've supported a great nonprofit called Vets to Industry that helps remedy situations like that. Great work Brian Arrington's doing over there. And then one last thing, because we're a humble group, I'm very proud of these initiatives. I'm proud of our team that all rolled up their sleeves and jumped in with an eye focused on action and outcomes. But here in 2022, major investment we made was our Global Supply Chain and Procurement Awards. Did you see any? Hopefully, Adam, you saw a few things related to that.
I did
this year. It just wrapped a couple weeks ago. We had the revealing of all the winners, but that vehicle is really, it represents our approach here, Adam. We didn't want just another run of the mill awards. There's so many out there, and not taking anything away from all these awards, but man, we wanted to bake our give forward look and view on the world into that vehicle. So, for us, again, you give from what you have. I think part of it was wanting to raise awareness on these challenging issues of modern slavery, which, Adam, it's on the grow. Slavery in 2022 is increasing. That should blow everyone's mind, and folks should look to do something about it, whether it's voting with your wallet or taking action, supply chain leader, or what have you. And in conjunction is this human trafficking for a variety of different reasons. So we wanted to use about 6 months in the kind of lead up to the awards to really give these issues more visibility. So Supply Chain Now, Buyers Meeting Point, and Art of Procurement, who all got together and teamed up on the awards, we partnered with a great nonprofit called Hope for Justice. who is on a mission. It's very simple. I love it. A singular mission of eradicating slavery and human trafficking from the face of the world.
It's powerful.
And look, Adam, we hear a lot of countries looped in and pointed at when we hear these things like modern slavery and human trafficking, but sadly, it's everywhere. Here in the States, here in North America, it touches every country in the world. So beyond raising awareness and raising and lifting up the mission that Hope for Justice is doing, we were very proud of a check we're going to be writing to them. That's a culmination of the entire awards. So thanks to all the nomination fees and our over the top sponsor, and then of course the work we did as a team. So that's, when I think of deeds not words, and when I think of real non lip service leadership, I think of things where you're really moving the needle, and that is our aim. Whether it's on campaigns we do, some of our campaign partners, or some of our Do Good Give Forward programming.
Yeah, I particularly love that campaign around the awards. We at Herd, we've been doing once a month, just sort of talking to folks who are part of our communities that we give towards, and we've been trying to figure out how we could get more creative about it, because as you said, when you're not Bezos, there's a cap to what you can always just give right out of the account. But what you all did was so creative, because one, it invented a new device that people could attach to and give through the fees, as you mentioned. And second, it really gave actionable ideas to those of us who are, we're not maybe Marines, or it sometimes can be easy to think, well, I can't go do anything. But to your point, we need supply chain professionals who can speak into these things. We need media professionals. Thought that was super creative, and appreciate what you all did there.
You bet, Adam. Thank you for that incredible partnership with those organizations I mentioned, and then a variety of team members that plug in different ways, including that was a tricky production on our part. But you know what? Those BHAG goals, you got to get out of your comfort zone if you're going to do some big things and try to move mountains. And that was a very, very rewarding initial project on our end, and we look forward to going bigger in 2023 with the next.
Okay, so speaking of the next year, you mentioned you actually have some big plans in the works in terms of new content, new trends that you're following, new plans that you're excited about. Tell us a little bit about those as we wrap up here.
I appreciate that, Adam. And again, I love the work you and the Herd team are doing, because y'all get it. And you know what? Before we talk about what's next, let's say that even though digital content and social media content and storytelling is more prevalent now because it's easier, that's a great thing. There's still so many folks that don't do it well, right? That I love Ron Popeil. May he rest in peace. I love that guy. But folks aren't buying a sales infomercial these days, right? No one listens to that.
Sure.
Set it and forget it. I love Ron Popeil. Anyway, for Supply Chain Now and our family, which we're very excited about where we're headed. New hosts, new shows, new formats, new topics. For us, Adam, well, we'll always have global supply chain at the heart of what we do, because it's who we are. It's where it all started. I'm a very self-labeled supply chain nerd, but we want to broaden our content and explore new global business topics, right? I think it's important, as we were talking about on the front end, it's not just about storytelling. It's about interacting with the folks that are listening. So I think finding new ways to engage with our growing digital family and ecosystem is really important. Will be a big part of the months ahead. Our third generation studios can be built out in King Plow in West Atlanta. I'm stoked about that. Adam, I don't know about you, man, but I love remote content creation. We've been doing it since March 2020 when our business kind of transformed like
Sure.
many, right? But man, to be back in person, rubbing elbows, breaking bread, getting those conversations in person, it's tough to replace. So looking forward to that. But throw all of that out. Let's say we have the most boring few months coming up, few years coming up, right? You never know. We should be grateful for being here in many ways after the last few years. But I think what I'm most excited about and what I think is my number one priority, very, very frankly, is building and growing an organization that our team members are proud of and love to work at, and building a company that truly does
Mm.
good. Not says it, not talks about it, but in how they act and what they do, and ultimately how they move the needle. That's what I'm talking about. So that's I jump out of bed every day, addressing all of that, but certainly working to serve those last 2 points, because it's at the heart of who I am, and it's a big part of our path ahead.
That's awesome, Scott. Well, from my seat over here on the outside, I've been watching you all before for years, and over the years as you've evolved, and I've really appreciated the example you've set, the way that you go about building, and certainly am excited to see what comes next with all the new things that you have in the works. If other folks want to keep tabs on what you're doing, both just personally and through the company, what are the best ways for them to follow along with you?
I appreciate that, Adam. Thank you so much. Supplychainnow.com is the easiest. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I love, a lot of folks beat up on Twitter a little bit. Some of my favorite digital relationships and in-person
Yeah.
friendships have come
Same
from
here.
Twitter. I think you can find brilliant people, much like Herd, on Twitter. And of course, you can find Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast from, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. But Adam, hey man, I feel a lot of kindred spirits here, and who knows, maybe as we're talking about coming attractions, there's some ways we can work together. And
Maybe
collaborate.
we'll have to catch a Clemson South Carolina game next one of these times. Maybe that'll be out.
Okay. All right. Or we didn't talk about the NBA ahead of time. I'm no, I'm a bandwagon Hawks fan, but I love what Trae Young is doing. And hey, the 76ers have got quite a team. Maybe we can next season we can get in the game.
Maybe.
Right?
I think the Hawks maybe have broken the Sixers for eternity last year, but maybe they'll still have a team. We'll see. Appreciate you, Scott.
Thank you, man.